In just a few days, Republicans in Congress plan to introduce a bill that could potentially decimate the government's ability to pass any sorts of regulations going forward. It's called the REINS Act, and here's how it would work. So basically, many federal laws delegate authority to agencies to work out the details of how to achieve relatively broad objectives set by the law itself. The agencies do so by drafting regulations that interpret and elaborate upon these statutes and which have the force of law. So, as an example, for instance, if the government says we need the EPA to regulate certain sorts of emissions in the air or in the water, they don't go in the original law into exactly how you do that, exactly which contaminants need to be regulated and in what way, how the funding is going to be distributed, and all of that in all cases. The agencies take the law and then they create regulations to allow them to achieve the goals of the law. Now, obviously, the agencies don't have unstoppable power to do whatever they want, but they need to accomplish the goals of the law. And that is how the U.S. has functioned up until today. Under the REINS Act, that's not how it's going to work. Under its terms, a new regulation that has an annual economic impact of $100 million or more, which is less than 0.0006% of the U.S. economy, must be approved by Congress individually within 70 days, or it doesn't go into effect. So either they can vote to approve it or not approve it, or hell, if they decide to not do anything. If it turns out in some dark dystopic future the Congress isn't efficient and can't get around to doing a lot of stuff, then it simply doesn't happen. And they need to do it on an individual basis. In many cases, large-scale laws like environmental regulations or the Affordable Care Act generate hundreds of regulations because the country is a complicated and large place. Congress would have to debate each one individually, or more likely would choose not to, and those regulations would not happen, which would allow the REINS Act, under the REINS Act, would allow potentially future Congresses, probably Republican Congresses, to nullify executive orders, to nullify past laws. You can imagine how this could work. Now, the House has passed the REINS Act 3 times already, but each time the legislation died in the Senate. And theoretically, if it had passed the Senate, it's possible that President Obama would have shot it down. However, now the Republicans have unilateral control over every branch of government, and so we'll see how it works this time. And when you think about how this might affect future presidents, understand that while congressional maps will be redrawn in 2020, in many key states they will be redrawn by state legislatures who were also elected using gerrymandered maps that give Republicans a significant advantage. As a result, Democratic presidents are far more likely to face a Republican Congress who would be the ones evaluating each one of these regulations than Republican presidents are likely to have to deal with a Democratic majority. And so it's sort of a convenient little trick, where if you can pass the REINS Act today, it doesn't matter if the presidency goes back to the Democrats in 4 years or in 8 years or to a third party or whatever. As long as you can maintain your gerrymandered advantage in the Congress, you have unilateral control over what happens.
So this is just another way to protect corporations, to ensure that, they don't have to deal with any type of regulation that they don't like. And so what the hell is the role of the government? So
this is basically North Carolina writ large over the entire country.
That's exactly right. And look, right-wingers are succeeding in this power grab in this country. They succeeded in North Carolina. I have no doubt under Trump and a Republican majority in Congress, they'll succeed in this case as well. And so it goes back to the age-old philosophical question of what the role of the government is. Is the role of the government, according to the right wing, to get involved in your sex life and your reproductive issues, or is it to protect Americans from any type of threat, whether it be businesses taking advantage of you, exploiting you, or international threats, right? I would argue that we need regulations to ensure that we don't get taken advantage of, as we have been getting taken advantage of for a while now, and it's only going to get worse if something like this actually goes through.
Yeah. Earlier today we did a story, as anybody watching the live show knows, where we talked about lead poisoning and how we reduced the level of lead in our blood, in the blood of Americans, by 90% over 40 years because we regulated cars. The cars used to emit a lot of lead. It's even worse than the paint that had the lead. And we said you can't put lead in paint anymore and you can't have it come out of the cars anymore. Now, we still have cars, we still have paint, and the cars are not that expensive.
I think they're better than cars from 60 years ago.
There's some chance they are, right? And we saved lives. We saved literally IQ points for the entire nation because lead actually makes people have lower IQs, makes them more prone to violence, etc. So regulations from time to time work. We used to have acid rain. We did regulations against that, and then we didn't have as much acid rain anymore.
Look,
and we used to have rivers that would catch on fire in America. We'd have green rivers filled with poisons, and we did regulations, and we cleaned them up. So if you don't do regulations, you know what's going to happen? If they're going to make an extra nickel by putting all those toxic stuff either in the air or in the water next to the plant, instead of getting rid of it in a safe way, yeah, that costs more, right? Get it using some sort of precautions. If it costs more money to do safety protections in a coal mine, well, they're not going to do it unless you make them. We know that because historically, that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
And then what happens? More coal miners die, more of your kids get poisoned, but multinational corporations that donate to these politicians get a little richer.
But that's exactly the problem here, right? Because you're mentioning all of this evidence of regulations that work. You're actually sharing facts as if the people who are in favor of this want to hear the facts. They know the facts. And these politicians are so short-sighted, right? Because all they think about is the short-term gains of getting money from these corporations. You live on this planet as well. You live in this country as well. These are the same regulations that are protecting the very politicians that want to do away with them because they're getting paid to want to do away with them.
Well, so let me be super clear about this, right? So there's two different people that I'm talking to, and one is certainly not Republican or Democratic politicians. Paul Ryan, I'm not going to convince him. He's not going to be like, oh, that's a good point. Yeah, people are getting poisoned all across the country. On the other hand, I just got $1 million check, right? So, no, Paul Ryan and the guys who are pushing this legislation are hopeless. So who am I speaking to? First of all, I'm speaking to Americans under the age of 35, because that's who watches our show. That's over 70% of our audience. And guess what? For Americans under the age of 35, 80% of them agree with us. And one day, we're going to be in charge. Okay, number two, the reason one of the ways we're going to get in charge is by getting the money out of politics.
Yeah.
Hey, I know they think that we can't do that, but we are going to do that, because if you're under 35, we have great agreement. By the way, even for over 35 on this issue, money in politics, nearly 90% agreement in the country. It's the only thing we all agree on. Does the money corrupt the politicians? Of course it does. So it's not to say there is no amount of regulation that is overregulated. Of course there is. When they tell you propaganda about how liberals want to control your life, why? Why would I want to overregulate you? Why would I? Because it would overregulate me. Why would I want that?
And whenever they give you that excuse, just remember the political party who wanted to regulate whether or not you can have sodomy. Okay?
Yeah.
That's overregulating.
The Republicans in some places, including in Virginia, were trying to pass laws like last year saying whether you're allowed to have oral sex or not. You want to talk about overregulation, right? Yeah. So we're not in favor of overregulation. We just want to protect the community and have the scientists, not Congress and corrupt politicians, the scientists figure out what is safe and what is not safe. And so I got to tell you, fight in any way you want, guys, but wolf-pac.com, those guys are fighting to get money out of politics. And you can do that with an amendment. And once you do that, you will be shocked. Because there was about a 40, 50-year period in this country where our representatives actually represented us. And when they did, it's not like there was no corruption, but there was a lot less corruption. It was less systematic, and it was illegal. We made bribery legal now, right? And in that era, you know what we did? We passed the EPA, we passed OSHA, and we actually protected Americans. We could have that again, but you got to get that amendment, wolf-pac.com. Right now, they're doing a membership drive. By all means, get people hired over there, wolf-pac.com/revolution. We'll have the links down below. Click it. Be part of the answer and the solution, not sit around and help them by doing nothing. Fix the media. Be the media. Come join us. tytnetwork.com/join.